Warning, this video may contain spoilers for late parts in the game. If you plan on playing this at some point, turn back now. You have been warned. Welcome to another CR review, everyone. Today we're talking about the first Xbox 360 game that I ever played, Kameo. It's become increasingly fascinating to see just how bad I was at video games when I was a kid, because I remember playing this game for like a month or more due to not understanding what to do half the time, compared to this playthrough which took only a couple days. I still think this game holds up incredibly well in the time that's passed, and the graphics through the Rare collection on the Xbox One X are absolutely beautiful and vibrant, so I was happy to get back into a game that I had played many years ago. Let's get into the basics. The biggest gameplay feature is that of the elemental warriors that Kameo can turn into, there being a total of 10 that you gain throughout playing the game. Each have their own specific abilities that will be helpful and necessary in order to advance in the game, such as Major Ruin's rolling ability, which is quite honestly pretty broken to your advantage in the fact that you can actually shoot yourself around in mid-air, or Flex's ability to grab onto plant tongues in order to reach platforms that you are normally unable to scale. In order to use these moves, you'll be expending the Spirit Bar, with each bar being individual to the warriors as well. Being able to switch between the warriors if you end up running out of gauge to refill it while it recharges for the other warrior. Each warrior plays extremely differently as well, but as you progress in the game, you'll get more of a handle on switching between them fairly easily through the toggle. The face buttons actually act as your transformation buttons, while you'll be fighting with RT, LT, RB, and LB. The A button lets you revert back to being just Kameo, which is the character I mostly use to traverse the world, as she can spread her wings and move around pretty quickly. You do get a horse to traverse, but I just abandoned the boy pretty much. She can also jump as well, being the only form who can. To lead into how to upgrade the warriors, I actually need to talk about one of the collectibles, so I'll just talk about all of them now. The first I'll talk about is the various elixirs of life that you can find, there being 12 total, and their usefulness lies in their ability to increase your health. This actually increases it for all the warriors, so you don't need to worry about whose health to increase or anything like that. The second is less of a collectible and more of a possible boost you can use, being the crystal eyes. There being 4 or 5 total. These can boost attack or defense, with the caveat of decreasing some other value of Kameo, and I didn't really experiment with these. The biggest collectible of the game is the elemental fruit that can usually be shaken off of plants or given by doing side quests. This is what you'll use to have your warriors learn a new move, as well as to individually increase their spirit bar. There are 100 fruits, though I only ended up finding around 60 and still pretty much breezed through the game, only not learning a couple skills, so I think they threw in a whole bunch of extras just in case. There's also currency in this game, being ruins, and are used to buy elemental fruits, elixirs, and alternate skins for your warriors, which, to be honest, are pretty dang cool. Another component that seems fairly big is the battle bonuses that are gotten through combat, but I don't think they really do anything, maybe just trying to relate to arcade games with scores or something, or maybe more for the multiplayer, which, yes, surprisingly there is multiplayer for the story, but I never really tried this out even when I was a kid. A final bit to note is the Chamber of Living Portraits that allows you to redo some segments of the game in order to increase your battle bonus, though I didn't really see a big reason due to what I mentioned before. The game starts with a quick cutscene explaining how Kameo ended up where she is. Kameo ended up being bestowed the element of power, which allows her to use the elemental warriors, and through jealousy of her sister, Callus, who was originally chosen to get the power, receded from her family and unleashed the great threat of a troll named Thorn, who had been frozen in stone for years. They kidnapped 4 of Kameo's family members, leading to her brash decision to attempt to free them without all of the elemental warriors, and even more egregious, without the Whatnot book. She eventually does make her way through Thorn's castle, and locates her family, who is being tortured by Callus, Thorn appearing behind her and literally smacking the elemental warriors that she had out of her, with her mother, Thena, using the last of her powers to teleport her away. She wakes up in front of the Queen's advisor, the Mystic, who immediately questions her on why she would leave without the whatnot due to her powers being weakened the further she is away from it, with Kameo stating that there wasn't time. After some explanation, the Mystic realizes that Thorn is in the mix of everything, telling Kameo to convince Ortho that she's still worthy of the whatnot. She calls in the warrior trainer who tests her before she is allowed to use the whatnot, being surprised that Ortho got himself trapped inside the book. They return to the Mystic and ask her to use her powers to locate the elemental sprites who are trapped in shadow trolls. Kameo gets confused about the elemental sprites, with Ortho and the Mystic stating that since the book was heavily damaged, it reverted the elemental warriors back to their physical forms, essentially being baby versions of themselves. She's sent off to fight the first shadow troll, defeating it and regaining the use of Hummleweed. She returns to the Mystic, who gets coerced into trying to locate her family, seeing that Hallis was taken somewhere in the Forgotten Forest. The warrior trainer takes her to the Badlands, where she sees that a ginormous battle is taking place, with the trolls trying to destroy the elemental shrines, being the only shield for the Enchanted Kingdom, with 2 already having been destroyed. She helps to take care of some of the threat before heading to the Forgotten Forest, locating another shadow troll and regaining the use of Rubble, using him to traverse deeper into the forest. She helps save some of the kids and a platoon that was sent to save Hallis, and ends up fighting a giant tree named Malwood, with Hallis trapped inside. Defeating it, freeing Hallis, who reveals a bit of history. Apparently, her father, the king, Solon, had allowed the trolls to live in their land, due to him thinking that the machines they knew how to build would make everyone's lives easier. This worked until a troll named Thorn rose to power. Solon was on a quest looking for the elemental sprites when Thorn decided to conquer everything, with Solon eventually deciding to deal with the threat and banishing the trolls for good. He then grants her the use of the elemental warrior Ash. The Mystic contacts Kameo and tells her of Lenya, who is taken to the water temple. She heads to the mountain falls and encounters another shadow troll whose defeat grants her the use of Major Ruin. She heads to the top of the mountain, fighting another shadow troll, and gains the use of the water elemental warrior Deep Blue. Kameo is then able to traverse the waters of the water temple and encounters Coralis, who has trapped Lenya, its defeat freeing her and allowing her to tell Kameo a great family secret. Apparently, Callis is Thena and Solon's only true child, and Kameo was actually adopted by Thena, who forbade the others from speaking of it. She also gives Kameo the ability to use Chilla again. The Mystic contacts Kameo once again and tells her where Yaros is being held, the Snow Temple. She encounters yet another shadow troll and gains the elemental warrior Flex, who allows her to reach even further up the mountain, where she fights another shadow troll, gaining the use of another elemental warrior, 40 Below. Through 40 Below's abilities, she's able to reach the Snow Temple, fighting Queen Thyra and freeing Yaros. Yaros further expands on how Kameo actually came to them. Kameo only appeared after Solon and, strangely, Thorn disappeared one day, being brought by Solon's elemental warriors, who also carried with them his element of power. He ponders on the strange disappearance of Solon, as the Mystic could only find that Thorn's warlords were the culprits, as when they actually tracked them down, they had the whatnot with them. He then gives her the use of a new elemental warrior, Snare. He tells her that the next elemental warrior is most likely located in the Ogre's Swamp, somewhere in the Forgotten Forest Glade. She goes there and enters, fighting the final Shadow Troll and gaining the final elemental warrior, Thermite. The Mystic contacts her once more and tells her to bring the Whatnot book back to her, with Kameo just telling her no, determined to free her mother and face Thorn already. The Mystic just argues this, with the ancestors chiming in to tell Kameo to just go on and do it. She makes her way through Thorn's castle, where she fights a metal beast named Lord Drock, defeating him and boarding Thorn's airship. After traversing it and basically destroying it, she finally meets up with Callis and Thorn. They taunt her, with Thorn eventually alluding to Callis being as gullible as her father, and the fight begins with Kameo eventually coming out the victor. After Callis gets knocked around, she remembers that the Mystic was basically egging her on the entire time to betray her family, and somehow also remembers that the Mystic also lied to her father about telling his family where he was going. mentally conveying all this information to Kameo, them both finally teaming up and attempting to take out Thorn. Somehow Callus realizes that their attack won't quite be enough and chooses to sacrifice herself by using some kind of magic in order to turn Thorn back into stone once more, at the cost of also turning herself to stone. Kameo is unable to help as the airship begins to crumble, getting knocked out for a second before appearing with her mother on an airship that she had saved earlier, carrying the two of them back to safety in the Enchanted Kingdom. Alright, from that you may be thinking, nice quaint story with a sad ending, right? Fuck no. Dear God. From the actual website for the game, there are journals written from the perspectives of a couple of the other characters and reveals just how fucked up Callus's sacrifice actually is. Basically, when Kameo appeared as a kid and Thena had to accept that Solon was dead, she actively began to ignore and neglect Callus because it caused her too much pain to even look at her because of how much she reminded her of him. She then put all of her attention into Kameo, which caused an immediate rift in the family. This all leads into 3 weeks before the start of the game and before Callus's 18th birthday, which would also be her coronation of becoming the new queen and gaining the element of power. Thena specifically avoided Callus during this time and focused solely on the preparation, even neglecting her duties to train her daughter while still giving time to talk to Kameo. Then, the elemental stand incident happened. Kameo has a dream one night about the element of power and decides to check on it as Thena doesn't like to keep it on her, another reminder of Solon, it being in Thena's room. She looks at it and decides to pick it up and clean it, but Callus enters the room and begins to scream at her because no one is really supposed to touch it. She sets it back down, but Callus continues to yell at her, with Kameo eventually bumping its stand where it falls to the ground and rolls around the room. Thena comes in and starts to yell at both of them, but it's mostly directed at Callus as she grabs her arm intensely, with Callus actually thinking that she is going to be hit, but she stops herself before Thena just yells that she can't trust Callus. They're both sent to their rooms, and this is where the Mystic comes in and begins to persuade Callus to betray her family, with a false vision that Kameo is actually going to receive the element of power. The Mystic also visits Thena and prods her further in the direction that Callus is unworthy of the element of power with another false vision as well. Callus then receives a letter from her mom to meet her in a little while, with Kameo also receiving a letter from her mom that states to meet with her immediately. This is of course the start of the game as Kameo meets with Thena, who forces Kameo to accept the element of power. Callus appearing due to not being able to contain her happiness that her mother might actually want to talk to her and finally explain the transition that is going to happen, as she literally had been having nervous breakdowns from feeling so scared about everything, only to be met by a scene that was originally a lie turn out to not just be a nightmare and actually turn out to be the truth. So now you can see how actually the good guys turn out to kind of be the bad guys in the whole thing, and how a grief-stricken family can crumble so easily, even a magical one. Also, one more thing to leave it a bit more fucked up, it's implied that Thena didn't hug her daughter once after Kameo appeared, so for 15 years. Kameo is a pretty damn fantastic game, and if you didn't play it when it originally came out, now is probably the best time to, especially if you have an Xbox One, so you can get those crisp graphics which are absolutely stunning. Gaining all the powers is a bit repetitive, but they actually made most of the shadow battles a little different from each other, which I applaud. These powers themselves are pretty dang cool and useful, though, and you'll usually be switching through them a lot, and even the early ones you still end up using at the end of the game. The game has some nice exploration value with the elemental fruits and the health boosts as well. There's even some nice side quests that meld with the overall story pace. My only real con is that the game never pauses the enemies. This may seem like a weird statement, but hear me out. After completing a task, the game usually pans to an open door, but the enemies are still moving towards you and usually get an immediate hit on you that you aren't able to defend. I also think it could have benefited from a pause while switching through powers. These grievances are pretty minor though, as I was still able to beat the game with no real problem. Sadly, I'm gonna end the video here, and this might seem like a strange statement, but there is a whole lot of extra information for this game, and might be more due for a different kind of history video, most likely, and that's due to the fact that Kameo had been in initial production to be on the Nintendo 64, which is actually wild as shit. There's only a couple videos to back this up apparently, with the more likely bit being that it was planned for early GameCube around the time that Dinosaur Planet was being made, which we now know as Star Fox Adventures. I mean, technically the wildest thing about the game is the fact that it even got finished, which is even more of a shame considering the fact that they had also had plans for a sequel that never got made. So there's a whole lot of history to look into. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next video.